Overman podcast with your hosts, Sophia Garcia and Taskin and Sophia. Tune in as we interview those affected by childhood cancer, gather their perspectives, and help others find comfort in their expertise.
Today we'll be discussing common cancer misconceptions. So I just thought this was an important topic to talk about because a lot of people have misconceptions about cancer, and that can be harmful because maybe they'll avoid like proper education about the topic, and I just think that can cause a lot of confusion. So I think it's important that we talk about specific ones and clear them up just for anyone listening that may have these misconceptions, because it's not a bad thing to have misconceptions. It's very common, and I think they should be cleared up. So as long as you're willing to like learn something new and learn that maybe these misconceptions aren't true, then I don't think they're that bad.
I wanted to discuss this because a lot of these misconceptions come from the idea that these childhood cancer survivors or people that are suffering from these cancers, they're like weak, they're fragile, and not just physically, but like mentally. And I feel like that's damaging not only to the family itself, but also the patients that are probably trying to adapt to their new normal life and just going back to their regular lifestyle that they had before cancer.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just start talking about like something that surprised me the most. So one thing that surprised me was that this is just like a fact that childhood cancers, they're like a myth is that they're always inherited from the parents, which I thought that was something that was pretty common, but actually only 2% of all childhood cancers are hereditary. So that was really surprising to me because I feel like when we hear about like cancer, we think like, oh, that comes from cell mutation. So cells, DNA, like parents. I feel like that's a very common misconception. But yeah, I found out that most childhood cancers result from like random cell mutations. So I think that's just important to note. And then also another one I was surprised that existed, I guess, was that cancer is contagious. Like it's something like the flu where people can just get it from just being around like a child with cancer. And I think that's actually very harmful because a lot of parents, like let's say a child does have cancer, the parents of their friends and like peers, like they can avoid them being around it because they'll think that cancer is contagious. And I think that's really harmful, especially because childhood cancer is already just such a thing that can affect your physical health and mental health so tremendously that if people like have misconceptions that it is contagious, that can be really harmful and it can just like hurt you.
So one of them, back to the misconception about it not being like genetically inherited, I found one of the same misconception. It was on that this is like a genetic mutation. And so oftentimes we think that, oh, people, if you don't have a history of cancer in your family, then you're not going to get it. But cancer can be caused by different lifestyle factors. And I feel like a lot of times people don't realize that. Even like within like in our society or community that I've been in, a lot of times we're always worried about, oh, if our mother had it, then we're obviously going to have it or something like that. And if your family does have cancer, then there is a higher chance that you may get cancer, but it doesn't necessarily mean that if your family doesn't have cancer, you won't get it.
Yeah, I feel like that was just what you brought up, like people being scared that if there's cancer in the family, like as a child, that they can get it. I think that's definitely something that I like was scared of as a child because I had like multiple family members that did have cancer, so it was like just scared me, and I thought like that meant like I was automatically gonna get it. But I think that's also just really damaging as well because it's like even though I had the misconception, like obviously I know now that that's even though it does increase the risk, like that's not the only way that you can get cancer, and I feel like that's something important to note because like I feel like having fears like that can just distance you from your relatives when they're going through something like cancer, which is like something that's also another myth I found that was that a child's cancer journey like only involves them, which I think like no, it doesn't. I think we've talked about this before, like how it's important that their family members and peers like are supported as well so they can support the child that does have cancer. So I feel like it's important just that people like don't have these fears because it can distance them from their relatives and like other friends and things like that when like those people that do have cancer really do need their peers and family around them and their support.
So the idea of them having to go through this their cancer journey by themselves. I think that's often developed from like the fear that you were talking about. I felt like a lot of people because of that fear they distance themselves from these people, and it's hard for the patients to go back to their regular lifestyle because of that. And I feel like oftentimes we sort of treat them like out of place. And I mean personally I don't know how that feels, but I feel like that may be damaging, and they might feel isolated, might feel different when they're really not like any different from us. We could get cancer anytime as like them. And I feel like that fear is irrational, and I think it's important to clear up those misconceptions.
Yeah, I think like just what you said is also really similar to another misconception I found, that even though it is like true that children with cancer can like develop more complications, things like that, like later in their lives, like children with cancer can have normal lives. So I think like with what you're saying, like how they're almost outcasted because they have cancer, like that's really damaging because they can have normal lives. And one factor that could contribute that to them not having maybe as much of a normal life is people treating them as an outcast or treating them as different, and like they don't deserve all the same things just because they had cancer. And I think that can be really damaging. And then also like just something really similar to that, like a myth that I found was that children with cancer always have shortened lifespans, but that's also not true. And a lot of like today, I feel like we're in a very lucky time where a lot, or just some statistic I found was that 3/4 of children that are diagnosed with childhood cancer in developed countries with the proper care, they can go on to live normal lives and have like normal life expectancies. So I think that's also just another misconception that I found.
Um, like you said, I feel like a lot of times we think that they're not like mentally strong because oh they've been going through cancer, but a lot of times these children they inspire their doctors, their family members to like continue fighting because of um the bravery that they have. And one interesting fact that I found from that was that they're socially challenged and generally have poor interpersonal and relational skills. And as you said, that they can't go back to a normal life, or the idea um, that you shouldn't tell your child that they have cancer because you think that they won't be able to handle it properly. I feel like all of those stem from the idea that cancer affects them it does affect them mentally, but just thinking of them as like weak people, or like throwing them out as an outcast, I feel like just doesn't sit well, because these survivors they obtain better coping skills and increase resilience actually, but that is an excuse the fact that many suffer from PTSD after their treatment.
Yeah, I think that's just really crucial also because just like mentioning that they do suffer from PTSD after, because another misconception that I like found was that a lot of people think that because um childhood cancer, like it happens when children are children, people think that they may not need the same psychological help or support because they think, oh, maybe they'll forget it, they won't remember what they had gone through because they're just kids, or like they're just kids, they don't need mental health help. But I think that's very just it's just not a good misconception to have, because like with our first episode, we talked to Michelle, we heard that she didn't have a lot of access to psychological help after her cancer battle. So I think that's just a really bad misconception, because it's also crucial that these kids do get the support they need just so that they later in their lives they have properly processed their cancer journey, because that's a very big thing to go through at such a young age. So I think that's also just something that I was like surprised that a lot of people thought that they didn't need the same psychological help. But I guess if you hadn't spoke to someone about it that had gone through the experience, like we spoke to Michelle about it, then I guess that's something that people could think like.
I building on to your topic of like people thinking that oh because they're children they don't need like certain information being given to them, but I feel like it's um sort of like dehumanizing. You're thinking that a child doesn't understand what they're going through, and they don't need the same mental health. And oftentimes what I realized was that children shouldn't be told that they have cancer, but I feel like this is an opportunity to teach them what they have, or the lifestyles that might lead to them having cancer. But of course, there may be like some concerns with the parent on how to like talk with your children about it. And I feel like oftentimes they should like consult the appropriate specialist and for a clarification,
Yeah. And
because I feel like a valuable lessons could be learned from them, like science, human diseases, and stuff like that, basically.
yeah, I also found something really similar about how it's really important that children, because another misconception is just that children shouldn't know or be told that they have cancer. I think this is definitely something we've talked about in our past episodes, just about how that can be really just a very bad misconception, because it's important that children know what they're going through. Like you said, they are human. They do understand what's going on. Like, and even if they don't at that point, they need to be told because they're going through it. So just about like what you said, that it can teach them a lot and it can be valuable. It can teach them about like just human diseases and things like that. I think it's really important that children do know, because it can also just provide lessons on like hygiene, nutrition, and just general health information that can be really important later in their lives. And then just like on the same topic, just about like other misconceptions I feel like should be, I guess, debunked. One thing that I found was that all tumors are cancerous, and then also there's no cure for childhood cancer. So while there's no like overarching cure for childhood cancer, there are treatments like chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and other treatments that do allow for over 80% of children that are diagnosed with childhood cancer in developed countries to be cured and just be cancer free. I don't know if cured is the right word, so I'm just gonna say cancer free. And then also, not all tumors are cancerous. I think this is something that's more cleared up today. Like I feel like I knew that already, but there are benign and malignant tumors that are just in areas, or that they won't spread throughout the body, and then they can be like isolated growths, and they won't be cancerous as a result.
Um, I think that's a good point you mentioned. A lot of times people think that, oh, the lump that I may have is cancerous, and I feel like that's like generated from the fear that they have, which is completely normal to have like that fear. But I feel like it's important to talk about it with specialists and doctors beforehand before jumping into conclusions. And on the topic of like not making assumptions, another surprising thing that I found was that in your school that there hasn't been anyone with cancer, but statistically that's impossible or unlikely. And I feel like we shouldn't like assume that, oh, there isn't anyone maybe like in our workplace or in our school that hasn't had cancer. And another thing is um, that if someone looks physically weak, they can't acquire the same knowledge and understanding as their fellow peers. And I feel like that's a huge assumption too, and that also dehumanizes them. And you're thinking that, oh, because they've suffered from cancer, they can't do well in school or in their work environment. But I feel like these survivors or just people who have had cancer, they have like a stronger mindset than a lot of other people do. And I feel like that helps them transition into like their normal life. And a lot of times, they can't live like their previous lifestyles a lot of times, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't go ahead and make a new normal life. They try to adapt their new environment and their new place.
Yeah. I think like the thing that you said about schools, like I definitely know there have been people in like in schools I've gone to where there have been people with cancer, but they may not talk about it that much. And I think that a lot of people, that can just be harmful, because people can just assume like, oh, there's no one in my school with cancer, or that I know of. Like maybe people do have cancer in your school, but they're just not like sharing their journey, because that's totally up to them. And not that like it's like that important that someone in their school does have cancer, but it's just like it's harmful for people to think that just because maybe they don't know someone, like a friend or a family member that has had cancer, like they won't have to think about it, they won't have to be educated about it. I think that's a very like just a very bad mindset to have, because then maybe you won't know about like things to prevent cancer, or like just some things like knowing when you could have cancer, things like that. Like I feel like it's important that people are educated so that they could get proper treatment and help if they would have needed it. And just like a question that like I had, I guess, for you was just like, what's the most harmful, or like how can misconceptions be harmful just to cancer patients and just in general?
So I think we've touched on that idea a little bit, but the idea that we kind of dehumanize and isolate these survivors and the patients, and it just kind of like it doesn't help with them being able to adjust and adapt to their new life. And I feel like these conceptions, if we continue to have these misconceptions, will develop like some sort of like fear of the patients, and will also like continue to think that they're mentally weak just because they may look physically frail or weak. And I feel like thinking that they don't have like a strong mindset, which they do because they're going through something so big that's affecting their life. It's um a bit odd to think that they don't have like a strong mentality that will help them in the future as well.
Yeah. And I guess just like the thing that I thought was the most like that caused the most harm from misconceptions were just that something I found from my research was that a lot like most misconceptions about like cancer treatments and like that can just lead to like that can hinder proper and the best prevention and treatment decisions from parents. So one misconception that I found was just that like herbal products alone can cure cancer, which I think that's a really harmful misconception, because if parents of a child with childhood cancer, like they think that herbal products alone will like cure their children, then they won't seek out the proper treatment, and that can allow the cancer to progress and it to get worse. And also that just attributes to like stigma for cancer care, because like another misconception or just another effect of misconceptions that I found was just that they create like fears and worries and stigma surrounding cancer, and that like leads to not only delayed diagnosis and treatment, but also people may like maybe will be less likely to take their medication or seek out social support from family and also like mental health support. So I think it's just like it just shows why some misconceptions just definitely need like although it's not to attack okay, this is not to attack people that may have these misconceptions, it's just to let people know that it's important that they educate themselves properly on diseases and like treatments, because if they have wrong misconceptions, then it can really create like worsen situations.
So I love the idea that you brought up that oftentimes these misconceptions prevent people from getting the actual medical care that they need, and not just like physically, but I mean mentally. Like going back to the idea that the family members they shouldn't be telling their child that they have cancer. I feel like if we don't tell them, we don't know what type of help they need from their reaction, or if they need any social care, as you said, from the hospitals or from their fellow peers. And also that the misconception that herbal medicine can alone um, uh, cure cancer. Is that an actual misconception that you found?
Yeah, I found that like a lot of people so like a lot of people think that herbal products alone can cure cancer, and it's not true. Like they have been shown to be effective with other treating like methods, or be helpful like with other treating methods with like chemotherapy and things like that, but just alone they're not like effective in curing it.
I feel like that misconception itself also creates the fear of like towards chemotherapy or like any other therapy to help cure cancer. I think one of the misconceptions that I found while researching was that chemotherapy isn't like a good option, but of course chemotherapy it does kill like other cells besides cancer cells, but I feel like a lot of these options they're like approved by like doctors, and like this is like the best way so far to cure cancer. And I feel like if we don't get these children like the help that they need, like we're preventing them from getting the cure that they should get, all because of the misconceptions that surround their illness, disease or illness.
Yeah, and also I guess like I do think some misconceptions, and not misconceptions, but just some fears surrounding cancer treatments like are valid because a lot of people will think like, oh, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, like hair loss, they don't want their child to have to experience that so early. And that's why it's important to talk to professionals because there are so many different treatment methods. Not every treatment method is going to be perfect for everyone. So like even if maybe chemotherapy may not be something that you would want your child to seek out because of fears of hair loss, things like that. There are definitely other methods you can seek out that aren't like, for example, like herbal, like things that will work and have been scientifically proven to work. So I feel like that's also really important. And also just about like those fears, I think it's just more important that the child gets the care that they need. And then also just something I found like I also found that in some cultures, cancer can be seen as like making someone evil and things like that. So I also think that that can like just attribute to stigma. And then it just also made me like think of the question like, how does cultural background, I guess, attribute to misconceptions and then also like stigma surrounding cancer? And like maybe have you considered that at all?
Um, Personally, I don't think I've like heard of that misconception, but I do believe it. That there are maybe like some cultural backgrounds that see having cancer as being evil, and I feel like that's harmful because then it kind of makes the patient themselves feel like they shouldn't get the help they need or make themselves feel isolated from their community when they need the community the most. And also another idea that's important that you do communication with professionals and your doctors. I feel like a lot of times we kind of like brush aside, but these patients they create like valuable connections with their doctors, and I feel like this connection should just not like last like during when they have cancer, but after, because cancer doesn't just affect you while you're still having cancer, but it affects you for a lifetime. It affects you mentally and physically, and I feel like having the connection with professionals is important, and not only just like mentally, but also like making sure that these misconceptions are like gone, and also like providing the best treatment possible for them.
Yeah. And just like to touch on like what you just said, like getting misconceptions gone, I think like I guess just some advice on how to avoid misconceptions. Just like the most important thing is to do your own research. Like you may see a post that may look I guess trustworthy like on social media especially. I think social media has also really contributed to a lot of misconceptions. So if you do see something and you are going to form an opinion based on that or like hold it very tightly, I guess just like I guess take on that opinion, it's important that you do research on it first because you don't want to spread that opinion when it or not opinion like the fact I guess that could be wrong. um and then also just spreading it to like spreading this information that you learn to your friends and family, like just so we can like educate everyone and avoid these misconceptions. I think that's just really important.
I think the big idea is like don't make assumptions. You shouldn't go ahead and go assume that, oh, if this person looks weak and you know that they have cancer, they're not mentally strong, or assuming that, oh, they do not need help after cancer because they're cured. And I feel like if we don't make those assumptions and actually go ahead and go do research like you said and ask professionals and doctors who have like they have information on like cancer, I feel like it's important to clear up those misconceptions.
Yeah. And just like also meeting or consulting a professional or a doctor, like if you are considering different treatment methods, that's doesn't I think a lot of people would avoid that because they may think that it'll hold them accountable to have to, I guess, look to that doctor for specific treatment. But I think when you're going through a disease as serious as cancer, it's important that you consult multiple professionals to try to figure out what is best for you. And then also um just in like looking for the right sources to educate yourself on misconceptions. Like even with the sources I used today, I made sure to look at ones like cancer.gov and ones from like actual hospitals like Mount Elizabeth and just like Health US News, things like that, where they'll like, if their entire site is dedicated to education on health, or they're a hospital, or like cancer.gov is specifically on like research about cancer. So I just think it's important that you check your sources. And then also what Taskin said, just don't make your own assumptions if you don't have like the right research and education to back you up.
I think that's important, like the not like talking with professionals and doctors. And I also think talking with like cancer patients themselves is important. You have to like understand like where they're coming from and the experience they had instead of like going ahead and making those assumptions. Because I feel like social media is such an important part, just like how you said. And a lot of times social media is flooded with misconceptions, but it's important to look at websites such as like the from hospitals and that enda.gov maybe. Those are helpful. And also maybe like personal stories of those that have suffered from cancer that are probably on social media as well is important to read as well.
So yeah, I guess I hope that this episode just helps people learn about certain misconceptions, maybe clear up some misconceptions, and also just about how to avoid misconceptions, and also being like an advocate. Like I hope our listeners can be advocates for proper like cancer education and just education in general. So yeah, I just hope that this episode helped with that. And do you have anything else to say?
The same thing as you. I honestly hope that this episode does help clear a lot of the misconceptions. I felt like a lot of the misconceptions were surprising, and I felt like other people should know about it as well.
Yeah. And just disclaimer, what we mentioned today, those are not the only misconceptions that exist. So if you do hear something, like that doesn't mean if it's not in this podcast, like to necessarily trust it. Always do your research, do your background research, things like that. And yeah.
If you or someone you know are looking to support childhood cancer patients and help them to experience a better childhood but are stuck on how, Cancer Kids First may be the answer for you. Cancer Kids First is a nonprofit organization started by high schooler Olivia Zhang that aims to improve the childhoods of cancer patients. Through volunteer work, donations, fundraising, and the creation of this podcast, those working with Cancer Kids First work to further its mission. If you're interested, go to www.cancerkidsfirst.org/get involved to get involved.
Another way to support the mission of Cancer Kids First is to listen to this podcast and follow us on our Instagram and TikTok at the Gold Ribbon Podcast and Twitter at TGR_on-air. You can also get in touch with us through our email, thegoldribbonpodcast@gmail.com. Episodes will be airing 2 times a month.
Before we end this episode off, we wanted to give our Sunday trivia shoutouts.
If you want to participate in our Sunday trivia, you can go to our Instagram at the Gold Ribbon Podcast, and every other Sunday we host trivia on our Instagram story. And anyone that plays can get a shout out as long as they click the yes on if you play to the end. So this week's shout outs are Daniela Vilas _
LSG Organization,
Shreya.VaddyReady,
Isa_Santoyo 04,
Procade and Hater,
Lexi SCIBILIA,
Raywa Sethi,
ROSQYSS,
Harini P,
Mara Dark,
J Jalen,
Pancake_R Better,
Kara Siegel,
Emma Sherman 1,
A Ashley.Phillip,
Demi Mo 21,
Piper_Pals,
K_Moder,
Hedda 928,
Princess Against Cancer,
Tanya_Nack Host,
Sapna Dance 1,
Nadia Dito _
Jay Laggy,
and _Yara Salman.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Go Ribbon Podcast.
If you have any ideas for or want to be involved with future episodes, make sure to check out the link in our Instagram bio.
Have a nice day, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.